The Madman! It's time for the neutrals. And first, I'd like to take a stop and look at Kazakus. We have seen this card revealed fairly early on, but only now have we seen all of the things that Kazakus can do. Step 1, choose a size. 1 mana 1/1, 5 mana 5/5, or 10 mana 10/10. Step 2, and this is different from the regular Kazakus before, you discover your first herb, of which there are 6 options. Swift Thistle Rush, Earthroot Taunt, Sungrass Divine Shield, Life Root, Lifesteal, Fade Leaf, Stealth, and Grave Moss, Poisonous. 50-50 if you are looking for specifically one keyword that you want, since there are 6 options and you discover out of 3. Out of these options, generally I think the best ones will be Swift Thistle with Rush, Sungrass with Divine Shield, Life Root with Lifesteal since you're generally going to be a control deck, potentially Grave Moss with Poisonous if you're looking to high roll. Into the next step, your second herb is going to be of 6 options. Wildvine, Battlecry, give your other minions +1/+1, +2/+2, or +4/+4, depending on if you chose 1, 5, or 10 mana. Grom's Blood, summon a copy of this. Ice Cap, freeze 1 minion, 2 minions, or all minions. Fire Bloom, deal 3 damage to 1 random, 2 random, or all enemy minions. Mage Royal, spell damage +1, +2, or +4. King's Blood, draw a, 2, or 4 cards. While I haven't quite honed in on exactly what type of deck is going to run Kazakus, because it's pretty flexible, you could in theory run it in an aggro deck if you didn't have any 4-drops. Which is actually quite possible, you could play it in a face deck. Curve off top end being Kazakus with the plan of just finishing them off with a 5-drop Kazakus. Could be mid-range deck which doesn't have 4 cost. Value deck without 4 cost, control deck without 4 cost. Given this, there's a pretty wide variety of decks you could put it in. Depending on the deck you put it on, that's gonna determine how good the herbs are. So I can't really evaluate this. Just gonna note that Fire Bloom is quite good when you actually have Poisonous. Also has synergy with Lifesteal. So that's how Kazakus works. Gonna be really interesting, and I think the baseline valuation on it is just gonna require putting together a bunch of decks and deciding which classes don't have good 4-drops in those decks you put in Kazakus. Kindling Elemental, 1 mana 1/2. Battlecry, the next elemental you play, costs 1 less. The big question is this card impactful enough to put into your probably going to be a value elemental or control elemental deck? To really give a rating on this, you have to put together the whole deck. Lushwater Mercenary, 2 mana 3/2. Murloc, Battlecry if you control Murloc, gain +1/+1. Seems most relevant in that Shaman Murloc deck. I'll go as far as to say it's quite good there. 2 mana 4/3s are great. Hecklefang Hyena, 2 mana 2/4, Battlecry, deal 3 damage to your hero. I'm not entirely certain if a 2 mana 2/4 vanilla is good enough. The fact that this also adds in 3 damage to your hero, it's just not quite alluring enough for me to put into a deck, though I am going to say it's probably not as bad as a lot of people think. Toward the Wilds, 2 mana 2/2 Taunt, Battlecry if you're holding a nature spell, gain +2 health. Again, it's hard to quite evaluate this deck without putting together the deck, but the most likely deck that this would end up in would be that Taunt Druid deck. If you've got a few nature spells in, which Druid has bound to have, play this on turn 2. It's 2/4 Taunt. Seems good. Darkspear Berserker, 4 mana 5/7, Death Rattle, deal 5 damage to your hero. 4 mana 5/7 is a lot of stats. And if you're playing a tempo deck, you won't care about taking 5 damage to your hero unless you're up against another tempo deck. The more aggressive a deck you are, I think the more likely this Darkspear Berserker starts looking good. Notably, this card seems to be the big payoff card of that Death Rattle Demon Hunter deck, which I don't think is good enough, but we'll see. Gold Road Grunt, 5 mana 3/7 Taunt. Frenzy, gain armor equal to the damage taken. I mean, that's just bad. The reason why it's bad is because Frenzy tends to reward you for dealing small amounts of damage to a minion in order to activate the effect. This one wants you to take a large amount of damage, which is very, very difficult to manipulate, or requires too big a resource. It's bad stats for cost. Burning Blade Acolyte, 5 mana 1/1 Death Rattle, summon a 5/8 Demon Spawn with Taunt. Seems slow, probably is slow, given the lack of Death Rattle synergy of immediately activating Death Rattles, I should say. This looks like it'll be too slow. But it does seem like this would be the big payoff of the Demon Hunter Legendary. It's like one of the biggest cards you can summon, the 5-drop. Sassy Scoundrel. I'm actually a big fan of this card. Reminds me a lot of Grifta, which was one of my pet favorite cards as well. Sassy Scoundrel is a 4-mana 5/5. Battle Cry, discover a card in your opponent's deck, they draw theirs as well. It's a really interesting skill testing, symmetric card. Unlike Grifta, as cards have gotten even stronger, this card has really good stats for the cost, instead of just Grifta's good stats for the cost. 4-mana 5/5 has not been done yet without a drawback, and this card, is that a drawback, or is that a small benefit? Yes, it's from the opponent's deck, and you both get that copy of a card, and generally cards are in a deck because they benefit the deck they're in more than, you know, random deck. That said, you get to discover the card. You know, if you're playing a tempo deck against a tempo deck, it's pretty much equivalent if you choose a minion. All the minions tend to be good stats for the cost, right? So they get a minion, you get a minion, you get a 4-mana 5/5. Sure, they get to play their card first, but presumably you've chosen a card that's better for your situation than for their situation. Additionally, there are some small benefits that if you're up against a really slow control or value deck, they could have 9 cards in their hand. You play this, draw them up to 10, and then they mill a card. While I just hyped her up a lot, I personally don't actually have great hopes for this card. But she is on the watch list of like potentially just decent cards to fill out your mid-range deck with. There's also the good old Kazakus problem, where you only put her in if you've also got a decent number of 4-drops already, because otherwise you would just take out those 4-drops and put in Kazakus. Injured Marauder, 4-mana 5/10 taunt, Battlecry deals 6 damage to this minion, making this initially a 4-mana 5/4. Given the lack of good resurrects, seems unlikely for this card to see play. Good card to pull out of your deck if you manage to do that. Great card to evolve into. Very lucky result. But yeah, otherwise, incredibly unremarkable. Taurajo Brave, 6-mana 4/8 Frenzy, destroy a random enemy minion. It's slow, but this is the highest value card that you can get back with the Warrior Legendary. And that would be quite a tempo swing turn. This just might see play in exactly that deck. Gruntled Patron, 4-mana 3/3 Frenzy, summon another Gruntled Patron. This definitely is not Grim Patron, but it's a cool little nod back at it. 4-mana 3/3 instead of 5-mana 3/3, but the drawback is it's Frenzy instead of whenever it just takes 1 damage. Based on the fact that each patron can max summon only 1 patron, that is very different from Grim Patron, where your first patron usually got 2 patrons. So seems unlikely to actually be good. Sunwall Initiate. It's a pretty strong basic card. 3-mana 3/4 Frenzy, Keen Divine Shield. Basically, if your opponent can't deal with the 4 damage in 1 swing, they're gonna have a bad time. That's assuming you just play this out without activating it. I think this is one of those cards where activating the Frenzy takes too much effort, and you usually don't want to. You just want to play this as a 3-mana 3/4 and hope to match up well against an opponent's 3 or lesser attack. Venomous Scorpion, 3-mana 1/3 Poisonous, Battlecry, discover a spell. While I'm not entirely sure how the flavor works here, the card is really, really good. Hunter Dragon Explorer, which was a 2/3 poisonous, except it discovers a spell instead of a dragon, and that's way better for a wide variety of control and value decks. I think you're gonna see this Scorpion across a lot of value and control decks. Easy 2-for-1, because poisonous, I mean, your opponent's gonna have to use at least 1 card to deal with the Scorpion. So you're always up a card, and being almost always up a card off of something that's 3 mana, with the flexibility of discovering a spell that suits your situation the best. Against aggro, discover a low spell. Against control, discover a high spell with a lot of value. It's great. Ratchet Privateer, 3-mana 4/3 Pirate, Battlecry, Give your weapon +1 attack. Excellent card if you have a weapon. This actually is uniquely in an excellent spot in Rogue because so often, use your hero power on 2, follows up really well with this on curve on 3. That makes it so much better than previous weapon buffs, which have been played, like Naga Corsair, 4 mana 5/4, and Toxicologist, 2 mana 2/2. 3 is the magic number, which follows 2. Great stats for the cost, and really good timing for those stats to come out. Hog Rancher, this is like one of the most exciting vanilla cards I've seen. It's very, very tough to point at a lot of these neutral cards and call them bad. A Hog Rancher, 3 mana, 3/2, Battlecry, summon a 2/1 hog with rush. If you push neutral cards enough, and they're just stats for the main part, they do eventually become good, and this is one of those cases. That's 3 mana, 5/3, or you could even see it as 3 mana, 3/2, deal 2. That's almost as good, if not better, than SI7 Agent, because sometimes you can play this on an empty board. You don't have to deal the 2. That makes it way better than SI7 Agent if your opponent doesn't have a minion. But for all other cases, it's almost as good as SI7 Agent, and you can play it in any other class. Doesn't go face, but you know, that flying pig just goes into all the minions, deals 2 damage. So is it better or worse than SI7 Agent? I mean, it looks like a side grade. And SI7 Agent is a card that a lot of classes would love to play. Excellent card that you will consider in a lot of mid-range decks, maybe even control decks, maybe even aggro decks. Just a card you're always gonna consider in a deck. Death's Head Cultist, 3 mana 2/4, taunt. Death Rattle, restore 4 health to your hero. Seems like a decent consideration for a control deck. For any deck that doesn't have enough health, doesn't have heal. The thing that I'm thinking of the most here is the value decks that are traditionally not playable because of lack of healing. That would be Rogue, maybe Hunter. Not saying that it's an exciting option to put into your control deck, but one that you'll consider. Crossroads Gossiper. 3 mana 4/3, after a friendly secret is revealed, gain +2/+2. Most likely deck this goes into is the Secret Paladin deck. Because the secrets are so cheap, you might be able to trigger multiple secrets on the turn that Crossroads Gossiper comes into play. And with that new weapon, turn 2 followed up with Crossroads Gossiper turn 3, there could be 2 secrets in play. As your opponent tries to remove the Gossiper, they might fail, and makes the Gossiper a 6/5 for 3. And it's really strong for aggro decks, and if they're really unlucky and fail horribly to kill it, which is entirely possible given the random secrets you're playing, that could be a 3 mana 8/7 attacking their face. Very scary. Like the worst case scenario for the opponent would be, you play this following your sword got the Avenge on turn 2, and then turn 3 it got the Noble Sacrifice. You play this, your opponent's got a 3/2, they're like, okay, let's try trading into Gossiper. They go into Noble Sacrifice. Noble Sacrifice gets revealed, Gossiper gets +2/+2, Avenge gets revealed, Gossiper gets +2/+2, Avenge triggers, Gossiper gets +3/+2. That's an 11/9. Oh, and your opponent's 3/2 is dead. Barrens Trapper, 3 mana 2/4, your Death Rattle cards cost 1 less. That is trash. That is some bad stats and effect for the cost. Talented Arcanist, 2 mana 1/3, Battlecry, your next spell this turn has spell damage +2. Most exciting parts for this card would be on small spells which AoE. Seems like 2 really good targets for this would be Fell Scream Blast from Demon Hunter, Shooting Star from Mage. You can also use this with Cram Session. And you've got 4 mana and use 2 cards, get a 1/3, and draw 3 cards. That's not too shabby. Basically, it's Celestial Emissary in a world where the spell damage +2 actually matters for cards, and also better stats than Celestial Emissary. Oasis Thrasher, 2 mana 2/3, Frenzy, deal 3 damage to the enemy hero, also a beast. Pay, River Crocodile got an upgrade. Cool. Probably not impactful enough actually, but the main problem is, with your limited resources, you can't afford to trigger the Frenzy. Lushwater Scout, 2 mana 1/3 Murloc. After you summon a Murloc, give it +1 attack and rush. while this isn't the auto-include that the other Murloc is into your Shaman deck, it's definitely a strong consideration. And it is for summoned, so that 1-drop, your cute Tinyfin can come out as a 2/1 with Rush and protect your Lushwater Scout. And finally, last but not least, it's Farwatch Post. This is actually a very exciting card. 2 mana, 2/4, can't attack. After your opponent draws a card, it costs 1 more, up to 10. As a man of value, I am a pretty big fan of this. It's got good stats to the cost. It can't attack, but that's okay, who cares? It's got an annoying enough effect that I think your opponent will want to trade with it. So it's got taunt as long as you have a decent enough amount of health. Most value and control decks can seriously consider the Farwatch Post package alongside the Morshan Watch Post package. Both have good stats for the cost. Both can't attack and don't have taunt, but have annoying enough effects that they might possibly be considered to have taunt. And then you just run the value card of Cargill Battlescar, which will get you a bunch of lookouts. If you want to be especially spicy, Rally from Priest gets back a 1, 2, and 3 drop, so you have the Farwatch Post on 2, you have the Morshan Watch Post on 3. You could get those 2 back if you set it up, and that does work with Cargill Battlescar. Summon a 5/5 lookout for each watch post you've summoned this game. So if you manage to play a Morshan watch post and a Farwatch post, you play the Rally hitting exactly those 2. That's 4 watch posts. Cargill Battlescar when you play will get you 5 5/5s. And yes, Jens, I'm correct here. How dare you correct me on the last one. I think the Mayor of Valleytown will enjoy playing a little bit of tower defense and bullying those aggro decks, tempo decks, with his watch posts. I think that will be a good anti-aggro tool. So there you have it, the neutral cards from Fortune the Barrens, and it's gonna be a tough set to evaluate because these neutral cards, you might have noticed that I actually legitimately, and I do believe it's legitimate, these neutral cards are better than the usual neutral cards. You can't just immediately dismiss them and say trash. We'll see some legitimate experimentation. So I'm looking forward to rating all the cards. It's not gonna be easy. Sets just rotated, there's a new core set. No one has any idea of, what's good. One of the toughest card ratings coming up soon.